don't want it, he's going to play it. Him, this one over here. Yeah. Anyway, lovely to be here. Sorry I'm a little late, but reminds me of Srila Prabhupada came to visit temple in Montreal. It was also a church. It is a church, except with a straight truth. This is something new that they did. Very good. Everything's paka, in good shape. Even the carpets.
This is a mosque before we bought it.
And this is the direction of Mecca.
Yeah.
5 times a day. We say Jayam Stuvam Tasya Yasya Tri Sandhyam. They do it Pancha Sandhyam. Anyway, thank you for reception. I can imagine the neighbors are really happy about it. Very welcoming. Not come to class. Embarrass me. Jayo Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jayo Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Balava Girivana Hari Gopi Jana Balava Girivanadhari Shoramandana Rajajana Ranjana Yashodanandana Rajajana Ranjana Yamunatira Vanachari Yamunatira Vanachari Jayo Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama. Jai Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Krishna Chitta, when after class, I just have something to talk to you about, just so otherwise I may forget. We're on verse 6, yes. The benefits of technology. Having a nice screen to project on. This is the divisions of the creation. Tapasa hidamanena vidyaya chatma samstaya vivrida vijnanabhalo nyapadvayum sahambasa tapasa hidamanena vidyaya chatma samstaya vivrida vijnanabhalo nyapadvayum sahambasa. Samsaya Vivida Vijnanabhalo Tapasahi Adamina Nyapadvayum Samsa. Anyone else?
Tapasahi damanina vidyaya chatma samsthaya
Chatma samstaya
vridha vijnana
samstaya Vedamanena Vidyayam Chatpa Samstaya Vidha Vidyanat Bhalo Tapasa by penance. He certainly Edamanena increasing Vijaya by transcendental knowledge. Cha also. Atma self. Samstaya situated in the self. Vivridha matured. Vijnana practical knowledge. Bala power. Nyapat drank. Bayayum the wind. Saha ambasa along with the water. Long penance and transcendental knowledge of self-realization had matured Brahma in practical knowledge, and thus he drank the wind completely along with the water. Please repeat. Long penance and transcendental knowledge of self-realization had matured Brahma in practical knowledge, and thus he drank the wind completely along with the water. Report by His Divine Grace, Srila Prabhupada. Lord Brahma's struggle for existence is a personal example of the continued fight between the living entities in the material world and the illusory energy called Maya. Beginning from Brahma down to this age, the living entities are struggling with the forces of material nature. By advanced knowledge in science and transcendental realization, one can try to control the material energy which works against our endeavors, and in the modern age, advanced material scientific knowledge and penance have played very wonderful roles in controlling the powers of the material energy. Such control of the material energy, however, can be most successfully carried out if one is a soul surrendered unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead and carries out His order in the spirit of loving transcendental service. Om Jnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Jena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasa Hari Gaura Bhakta-vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Long penance and transcendental knowledge of self-realization had matured Brahma in practical knowledge, and thus he drank the wind completely along with the water. Divisions of creation. Earlier on in the second canto, Shukadeva Goswami described the 10 features of Srīmad Bhagavatam. Puranas have to have, general Puranas have a minimum of 5 subjects. And Mahapurana, like Srīmad Bhagavatam, 10. Atra, Sarga, Visarga, Sthanam, Poshayam, and so on. So Sarga, Visarga. This is Visarga. This is secondary creation. primary creation is Mahavishnu's creation, the glancing over of the material energy. It's a very, very sort of detailed science. Brahma Samhita describes it. A long time ago, Tamal Krishna Maharaj was first in Cambridge, and then in Oxford, in the UK. So of course I was there, and we spent a lot of time together. Once he came traveling with me to the whole tour of UK. I did that quite a few times every year. And at that time he was working on Brahma Samhita commentaries, which sort of printed posthumously, and coincidentally I was also writing about creation. So we had interesting discussions, and yes, one of them was, of course, I was just going from purports. There weren't many other books at that time. I was just going from Srila Prabhupada's purports. He had Gopi Puranadapu translating for him different books and commentaries by acharyas. Anyhow, and that was the time after, just as we were going to Ireland, then Jaipataka Maharaj got attacked in Spain airport, and then we came back to London, and we flew to Spain and stayed there with him for about a week. It was just 1 millimeter away. Krishna saved him, continues to save him. Tapasya brahmacharjena samena dhamena tyaga socham satyam. So tapasya is the principle of austerity is mentioned throughout Shastra. There's no spiritual advancement unless one performs austerity. So Maharaj Rishabdev also says, Tapo divya putra kajena sattvam sudyatyasya brahma sokyam tvanantam. By tapo divya, by spiritual tapasya. Of course, there's different types of tapasya. Even here, Srila Prabhupada is pointing out the tapasya of the materialists in order to gain the siddhis, material siddhis, perfections that they get. They also perform austerities. Going to school is an austerity. When we were in Dallas in 74, then maybe 75, morning walk, Srila Prabhupada was saying work is punishment for being in the material world. That's why you have to work. And there's the pictures back there. Pictures on one side, pictures on the other. Either you're playing with Krishna or you're doing Sankirtan with Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, but it's all play. It's equal play. But work, yeah, it's all punishment. Nonetheless, everyone, even our Lord Brahma, and he's now this creation from the body of Garbhodakshaya Vishnu is being described, and relevant to us, of course, because we're in Lord Brahma's line. We're in Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's line, and ultimately that is the only line that counts in this age, or rather all others find their shelter in this Gaudiya Sampradaya. But still, for the sake of scholars, Brahmas, scholars, Western scholars, Indian scholars, then there are 4 Sampradayas. So technically one should be in one of the 4. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu accepted Lord Brahma's Sampradaya. The Thakur Bhaktivinoda describes this in his Navadvip Dham Mahatmya, which caused quite a stir with the Ramanuj Sampradaya when they were celebrating. That was 2 years back or 3, Ramanuja's 1000th year of his appearance. And one of these sort of younger acharyas became very incensed with this idea that in that Navadvita Mahatmya that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu meets Ramanujacharya in Navadvip and he puts his foot on Ramanujacharya's head. I said, there's no such thing as, he may be a great saint, but putting his foot on Ramanujacharya's head, but then why not? He's not a great saint, he's Krishna. And so that was, but for the most part, Ramanuj Sampadaya, very, very supportive and really appreciative of Srila Prabhupada's extraordinary service. One of my godbrothers told me that Pejar Swami, is that the name? He visited Sridham Mayapur at one time and stayed there, stayed at our ISKCON campus, and discussion of book distribution came up, and about what devotees do. They go out on the streets of, who knows, New York, Chicago, Atlanta, LA, you name it, and they're standing there all day long, and they're approaching men, they're approaching women, and they're selling Srila Prabhupada's books. So he said, if I had to do that, I would fall down. Of course, I take that as a statement of humility, but the activities, the empowered activities, like I was looking at Maharaja's table of contents, and there it was how Srila Prabhupada, how was it termed? Mystic or transferred mystic power or empowered, how devotees were empowered by Srila Prabhupada. I can't remember right. Yes.
Empowering to perform miracles.
It's a miracle. It's a miracle to, you're selling something. I mean, they are not looking, this is the last thing they're looking for. And to empower them, to do all of the things. I mean, book distribution is one, but, and it's, you could say, the most extraordinary or miraculous thing that we do, but actually so many other services to spread Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's mission. It's not the monkeys and the bears fighting the war, but it's the squirrel and the spider. We're sort of on the level on the squirrels and the spiders. I mean, who compares to Hanuman or Sugriva, but the monkeys and the little whatever it was that Hanuman was competing with. So, yeah, empowered. Krishna Shakti, so empowered by the potency of Krishna and through the great desire of the Vaishnavas. So much so that Prabhupada even said, I never expected, even Prabhupada was amazed by what's going on. Tapasya, So austerity, yes. So karmis perform austerity, going to school is austerity, working is austerity. You have to sacrifice so much for a specific result. And as Srila Prabhupada says, this sort of scientific research, although it's really a futile effort, but nonetheless they, this thing and that thing and so many things which make our life easier, and in one sense you could say from a mundane point of view, make the ordinary person's life easier, but it goes through a lot of austerity. What's it called? Radioactivity. So I remember reading this book about Madame Curie, who found radioactivity, making thousands and thousands of combinations of experiments in order to finally get one that glowed, and that sort of led the way to so many not so good things, some good things, but a lot of really unfavorable things as well, like nuclear bombs. And then there's the tapasya, or the austerities of the yogis. They want to achieve this, one of these siddhis, anima, lagima, prapti, siddhi, ashrita, vashrita. Srila Prabhupada, in the beginning we used to get Srila Prabhupada's, well, they were tapes at that time. If you know what a tape is, you may not. Cassette. And usually the temple would receive like 3 or 4 cassettes a week. And when we went on traveling Sankirtan, I remember going on traveling Sankirtan for like 2 months, and Temple President gave us 3 cassettes. So the good thing about that was we memorized every verbatim Srila Prabhupada's lecture, because that's all we did. We just kept listening to that. We had our own classes in the morning in the van, but still we were always listening to Srila Prabhupada's classes. And one of those classes was Prabhupada's talking about the going to Kumbh Mela. Of course, Srila Prabhupada was living nearby, and seeing the yogis, and Srila Prabhupada talking about how the yogis travel throughout the universe through the waters of the Ganga, and they just go in one place and come out another place, and then he says, I have seen them just come out of the water. So Prabhupada appreciated that, although they're not Radhanath Swami Maharaj wrote his little book about living with the yogis, and how these yogis really were very serious yogis. They weren't bogey yogis, but they were real yogis. So they perform all kinds of austerities, but what do they want? Nanakapishtam, na chaparamishtam, na sarvabhumna, na rasahadipatyam. So Richasura says, yes, I don't want to become a Brahma, I don't want to become an Indra, I don't want to achieve some extraordinary power. Those verses, you know those verses from Richasura? They're sort of very favorites of Vaishnavas. Just the last few verses of the chapter, Richasura's prayers to the Lord. Anyway, he's saying, I'm not interested in any of that. On the other hand, of course, we also perform austerity. Ultimately, what's it for? To please Krishna, to show our sincerity in devotional service. Rising early in the morning, 3 o'clock, 2:30, 2 o'clock, earlier the better. And I remember sometimes in Vrindavan, when we were still just staying in the guest house, rising at like midnight, going to sleep early at 6, get up at midnight. And Srila Prabhupada said between midnight and 2 a.m. is the most spiritual time in Vrindavan. And it's a fact, you hear a lot of extraordinary sounds at that time. At least at that time. Now you hear all kinds of not so extraordinary sounds. There's all kinds of music and sounds going on. But it's better than in Mayapur, because at least they're generally chanting about Krishna. In Mayapur you hear techno music. That's the latest fad. Loud techno music. Especially certain times, Kali Puja and so on. And so we perform our austerities and penances, and for one reason, because without it, you can't control the senses. So we say penance is actually sense control, or austerity seems to be for us living like human beings. Is rising early. I mean, chickens rise early and birds rise early. It's not a great spiritual attainment, put it that way, when you get up early in the morning. And of course, following the regulative principles, Prabhupada said, all right, it's an austerity, but it just means you're a human being. So you have that experience. I'm sure Maharaj has experience in India. I know I have that in the UK because I lived there for 20 years. So, sometimes initiating elderly Indian ladies, what are the regulative principles? And then they say, no illicit sex, no gambling, no meat eating, and they're puzzled. What is this? What are we talking about? This is just life. There was regulated, never knew it was a regulated principle. It was just the way generations back lived, human beings lived. But we didn't necessarily live like that. For us, yes, that was, as Srila Prabhupada said, if I tell them this, they're going to tell me to just go home. But devotees didn't tell him to go home. That was also Srila Prabhupada's mystic power, how he could convince us to do something. I don't think anybody else convinced us to do that, but Srila Prabhupada did. So, vidya, tapasa, long penance and transcendental knowledge. So, bhavo jnana tapasa, putramad bhava magata. So, by penance and transcendental knowledge, a transcendental knowledge of what? Of self-realization, of knowing, yes, I am Krishna's eternal servant. And in due course of time, what happens? You perform penance, you cultivate transcendental knowledge, and it becomes vijnana. So of course here is the original Brahman, Brahma, and then jnana, vijnana, astikam, brahma, karma, svabhavajam. So they're both jnana, vijnana. And Krishna himself points out, all right, you have knowledge. Now what do you do with this knowledge? We have, for instance, knowledge, all right? We chant Hare Krishna. Now, how do you chant Hare Krishna? You don't just chant Hare Krishna any old way. Even yesterday we were speaking about chant 16 rounds, follow regulative principles. Srila Prabhupada didn't get into detail, but he does get into detail elsewhere, especially in the 6th canto. But how do you chant 16 rounds? So there's a science to chanting 16 rounds, offenselessly. What to speak of offenselessly, purely, and ultimately chanting with love. So yes, we have to chant 16 rounds, but there's a lot of things to unpack in that instruction. So tapasya vidya, as we cultivate transcendental knowledge, and that's why Srila Prabhupada gave us these wonderful books. Transcendental knowledge of self-realization. These two things together, then vijnana comes. Realization, practical application of how to put into practice the real science of Krishna consciousness. And again, we're reading in that purport yesterday how Srila Prabhupada points out, according to time, place, circumstance, the Acharya will give a change in the details of spiritual life. As to, Krishna says, Satatam Kirtayanto Mam. Now we should always chant. Now we don't chant 24 hours a day. Although even Srila Prabhupada sometimes would say chant 24 hours a day, but 16 rounds. And Sankirtan, book distribution, Bhagavatam class, and in one sense, in the right consciousness, taking prasadam, in these ways, doing our japa. This is all certainly all Yogis Sankirtana prayer. So then this is the vijnana, the result. And Srila Prabhupada made specific adjustments. And how did that come? That came as a result of his connection with Krishna. That ultimately, Jena Kena Prakara, Rupa Goswami says, somehow or another. So here are Westerners, they're not qualified, they're not austere in the way that, the way that we live now, the way we live now in Mayapur. We live like kings. Especially compared to the way we first lived, when we first used to go to Mayapur, not the long building, the wall where they have shops now. So that's where we were. The ladies were on one side of the gate, men were on the other side of the gate. It was austere. Of course, then everything was austere. Just India. Just the atmosphere, everything was quite austere. But Srila Prabhupada says these people are not, they don't know how to live like this. They're not designed for austerity. Indians are designed for austerity. I saw that especially when I would sometimes go to Rishikesh and see real yogis. I saw yogis sitting, making these little cow dung fires around them in the middle of the day, and just sitting there, and you can see their slim bodies, long hair. They live off it. They thrive off of austerity. We thrive off of sense gratification, not austerity. Nonetheless, some formula has to be there in order that people can move forward in spiritual life. But here these two things are together, penance and cultivation of transcendental knowledge. So when you do the two things, then you get Dadami buddhi yogam tvam jena mam upayantati. So of course Krishna says, Tesham satata yuktanam bhajatam priti. All right, so he says with love. It may not be with love, but in effect, for us practicing penance, cultivating transcendental knowledge, it's a sign of love. Shruti Kirti Prabhu, he went with coming with Srila Prabhupada and so many devotees. Just like we had kirtan here, but we used to do that at the airports, inside, like 200-300 devotees. And people like, forget it. You don't know which flight you're going on, you can't hear anything. Nothing was And still, we had this big, and Prabhupada would just walk down the corridor, and when they arrived at the temple, Prabhupada, he asked Srila Prabhupada, he says, all these devotees, and it's a fact, sometimes devotees would be the first time they'd see Prabhupada, and they just, some faint. Certainly devotees would just cry, they'd just be, or just going mad in kirtan, jumping up and down. Srila Prabhupada, devotees love you so much, and they're crying when then they see you. He says, but I don't cry. I don't show the same type of love. Prabhupada is thinking a little, and then he says, you like serving me? He says, yes, Srila Prabhupada, I like serving. He says, that's love. So, yes, Priti Purvakam, well, we may not have real Priti in the strict sense of the word, but serving Srila Prabhupada, serving Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, that is the path of love, and it is the show of a certain degree of love that's there. Otherwise, we wouldn't continue to do it. So it comes to Dami Buddhi, that intelligence of how to actually progress forward. And that's why we have these twin missions of Srila Prabhupada: spread Krishna consciousness all over the world, spread the chanting of the holy name, and these books, because the two go side by side. With chanting and with transcendental knowledge, Shavanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu, Smaranam. Smaranam means that you're remembering what Shavanam, what you heard. So these are the real important ingredients: Sadhu Sangha, Nama Kirtan, Bhagavata Shavana, Mathura Vasa Srimurti Yashodadhaya Srivana. So, but Sadhu Sangha means hearing. Sadhu Sangha, Nama Kirtan, Bhagavat Shravana. These are the paths of, and of course Mathurya Vas, these are the paths of Bhagavat Vidhi, and then Panchatriki Vidhi, those together. So that knowledge will come. But what is that knowledge? Tabani Mudhi Jogam Tam Jena Mam Upayantiti. How you will come to me. That ultimately Krishna will reveal that knowledge, but that effort is required, and that is real austerity. That austerity which ultimately transforms into love. Tapa. I had the acquaintance of a very wise sadhu, and he explained to me the different explanations of the word tapa as described in the commentary to Vedanta Sutra. And must have been Baladev Vidyabhushan, who then ultimately gave the version, the Shankaracharya's version of what tapa is and so on, that ultimately tapa is the heat of the gopis' transcendental love. So ultimately, tapa, austerity, that austerity which brings you to Krishna Prema, which brings you to loving Krishna, that's our austerity, that's the austerity that's worthwhile. Otherwise, it's just, again, hard work for another type of sense gratification. Even the Brahmavaris, even Mayavadis, they perform such austerities. But aruya krichena param padam tata. But ultimately they also come. They'll also fall down because they're not fixed at Krishna's lotus feet. So knowing that, he said, well, if I'm going to be able to continue functioning here, and what my real role is, then he drank the wind and he drank the water. Well, Prabhupada points out that there may be obstacles along the path of practicing devotional service. Sometimes we try to make arrangements to become free from those obstacles. But in any case, ultimately you can only do so much, and we depend upon Krishna to allow us to move forward. So here Prabhupada concludes saying that such control of the material energy, however, can be most successfully carried out if one is a soul surrendered unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead and carries out his order in the spirit of loving transcendental service. So as I was reading that sentence, then I was thinking of that we have Rupa Goswami's formula for Yukta Vairagyam Uchate Ana. How does it start? Anasaktasya Vishaya Yatarha Rupa Yunjita Nirbande Krishna Sambande Yukta Vairagyam Uchate. So that only devotees really know the ultimate purpose of austerity and for what reason the material energy should be manipulated, fine-tuned, not too much. Otherwise, otherwise it becomes over-endeavor. So not too much endeavor, but nothing happens in the material world without endeavor. So what is that balance? And that endeavor should always lead us to serving Krishna and pleasing Krishna. Yajna Sankirtana prayer. Is it really a yajna? Generally this picture of yajna is something that's like an austerity to perform, but chanting Hare Krishna is not an austerity, especially once we develop a taste. Sukirtina anusmrityo kramena, once that sukirtan, once you get that chanting nicely, then it becomes such a relishable thing, nothing compares to it. So, yes, it's not a austerity. Krishna consciousness becomes Krishna life, it becomes our life, and ultimately it becomes the most anandam buddhivardhanam patipidam punamritaswadanam sarvatma snapanam param vijayati Shri Krishna Sankirtanam. It becomes the most wonderful, wonderful thing. So Krishna says in the beginning it tastes like poison, but then later on it turns into real nectar. So we've already been drinking poison. Of course, that poison tastes like nectar in the beginning. Nonetheless, strengthening the intelligence. So when Krishna is concluding the third chapter, Indriyani Paranyahur, Indriya Paramana, Manasastu Puro Buddhi, Yo Buddhi Parasastu. Manasa Buddhi. Above the mind is the intelligence. And without strengthening the intelligence, the mind will bewilder the intelligence. Unless the intelligence is in control, mind can very easily chanchala himana Krishna. So yes, Arjuna says, well, it's like, controlling the wind. Now, here, Brahma could drink up the wind. I'm sure Arjuna had a weapon. He had wind weapon, one wind weapon against another wind weapon, or a wind weapon against something else. So, but weapons aside, then controlling the mind is like, and day and night. Mind doesn't rest. Intelligence gets, Bhagavatam points out, sleep strengthens the intelligence. but not too much sleep. Oh, I'm going to get really smart by sleeping 24 hours a day. No, that's not our idea, but nonetheless, yeah, the intelligence wearies. So one has to, Dami Buddhi, one has to get that transcendental intelligence from studying this transcendental literature, everything, every word. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, every word is leading to Krishna Prema. How that's going on? When you read the Acharya's commentaries to the initial verse of Bhagavatam, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, Jiva Goswami, then they give an idea of how all the words point. Of course, it can be understood in different ways. That's like a mind-boggling thing, how you understand verses and so on in different ways, Atmarama Samulayo, and yet they're all right. They're all the absolute truth. Well, isn't there one absolute truth? But how can you understand things then? This explanation of verses, Sanatana Goswami especially in his commentaries, he would say, or it's like this, or it could be like that, or it could be like this. And sometimes he gives like 10 different alternatives. Well, which one is it? Well, it could be all of them. There's a lot of inconceivable things in this Krishna consciousness. But everything comes from Krishna if we make that proper effort. By the grace of Srila Prabhupada, the gifts that he's given, this wonderful transcendental literature, the holy name. Just give this one life to Krishna. Prabhupada's mantra. Give this one life, and it's a fact. What haven't we done? Yeah. Not just what haven't we done, what haven't we been? You know, we've been everything from Brahma on down. Brahma Bhuvana Loka. So we've been everything. And what's it got us? The, only real concrete thing is what it's got us, is what you see in the mirror. This is the result of so many lifetimes. And then, of course, our mind and our karma. Here's that one chance, and just one lifetime. And thank goodness for us, it's a short lifetime. So, 50, 60, 70 years, just give that one life to Krishna. And then go back home, back to Godhead. Although Prabhupada would often say to devotees, live long. Srila Prabhupada didn't live that long, considering his lifestyle, who he was, but then Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur was even younger, 64, 65. In his 60s. I mean, that's nothing. Nothing. But in the commentary to Krishna's disappearance, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says that Krishna is setting the example that once a Vaishnava has finished his mission in this world, he should not tarry any longer than he has to in the material world. Once your mission's done, then it's time to go. And when is our mission done? Srila Prabhupada just wanted to keep on fighting, keep on going and going. Well, even if Srila Prabhupada wanted to keep on going, but Krishna decided now the mission's done, and then it's time to go. But until then, what's the use of you being Americans, Europeans, if you don't do something wonderful? So, yeah, this is the place of wonderful book distribution. I mean, America, it's the miraculous things that they've created. This telephone. When I went to university, there was a computer. I'm not going to exaggerate. It wasn't as big as this room, but it was, it was like a room. The computer was a room, and I had to sit there, and I had to punch cards. You had to punch out cards that gave you instructions. Okay, 10 times 12, and I had to punch it out. 10 times 12 what do I need a computer for? 10 times 12. You have to punch it out and put it in, and then this huge big thing moves, and it tells me, oh, it's 120. Thanks for nothing. I didn't need you for that. But this is like so much more than anything was there. What to speak of computer? I've got my little computer here. I've got thousands of books. I don't know how it works. It's beyond me, the technology, or the GPS thing, it knows exactly where you're going, make a left, make a right. So if they put that intelligence to use to Krishna consciousness, could really do wonderful things, and really that's preaching, how to convince these people to use their extraordinary intelligence for serving Krishna. Then you could really turn the world into Vaikuntha. Let's see. We'll see what happens. Right now, especially this country is not going in the direction of Vaikuntha. Hare Krishna. Anyway, thank you so much. Hey, this is a great place. I'll buy it. If I get the money. Yeah, fantastic. Anyway, I'm sure whatever you'll do is be fantastic. This is real. Maharaj, like to make any corrections or additions?
No. Question. The first word of this was tapasa. And then, of course, in discussing that, you mentioned also about vairagya. So could you please explain a little bit about the relationship between tapasya and vairagya?
Relationship between tapasya and vairagya. Of course, vairagya comes from knowledge. If one acquires knowledge, then he develops the strength to renounce, and the performance of austerity then comes from that personal strength, that inner determination that I'm going to do this for a specific reason. So one has to ultimately be somewhat renounced, because austerity is generally defined as doing things he would not otherwise do. How would you make the connection?
Yeah, austerity is an activity and vairagya is a state of mind. Is it not? Yeah.
So you have to have the state of mind to perform the activity.
But it may not be, it's like Hiranyakashipu performed austerities, but he's not ultimately detached from the world, but he's performing austerity to
but he's
enjoy the world.
Certainly detached from his other alternative life in order to achieve some even better materialistic lifestyle. So you have to give up something, just that fact that you're going to stand there and ants are going to eat your body up. Everything until you're not even skin and bones, you're just bones. And you really have to be determined for that there's something better at the end of all of this. You really got to be detached. Yes, it's a state of mind, it's a fact. But that state of, everything, you need a state of mind to perform any activity. Even if it's in the mode of ignorance, Still, one has, of course, mode of ignorance means you don't know why you're doing anything, so you don't really have a creative or a learned state of mind. But those in the mode of passion, those in the mode of goodness, what to speak of transcendentalists, they certainly have the correct state of mind. Dharmatma Prabhu, what do you think? There's the microphone. Dharmatma Prabhu was like the...
Without austerity, we can't make spiritual advancement. Of course, too much austerity makes you hard-hearted, right?
Yes.
So there's a balance, there has to be that balance where the result of the austerity should be enlightenment in Krishna consciousness.
Enlightenment, austerity is in the mode of goodness, and then to please Krishna is ultimately, I'm going out selling books for my spiritual purification. That's good, but the best is I'm going out to please Krishna. I'm going out to please Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And my advancement, I'm leaving it up to him. Anybody else? Maharaj, other comments?
Many things to say, but not just now.
We had a nice talk yesterday. That's what Krishna consciousness is about. You go out on Sundays, on Sankirtan, and you have days off during the week. What, Tuesdays, Wednesdays?
It depends on the event.
Oh.
See what booths and conventions, so sometimes they have to travel, set up.
I didn't like Sundays. Sundays, family days. I like to fight with kids and grabbing books out of your hand.
Maharaj, in this verse, Brahma is, he's matured, his word matured in penance and transcendental knowledge.
Realization.
Yes, self-realization. And in the previous verse, actually Brahma is scared, he's disturbed because there's strong wind blowing. And here he's swallowed the wind. And so this maturity has also led to fearlessness, which at least personally myself, many times I become perturbed, disturbed, scared, don't know whether we're proceeding in the right direction, are we actually pleasing our spiritual master or Krishna or by these activities, and the lack of realization causes disturbance. So if you could kindly speak about that.
I mean the general formula, bhaya dvitiya abhiniveshitat syat, that fear comes from bodily attachment or seeing things as distinct from Krishna. Then a devotee's fear that, am I doing the right thing? In one sense, there's no wrong thing. Of course, in another sense, if you did the wrong thing, Prabhupada let you know that you were doing the wrong thing. But still, it was the right thing because you're trying to please. And we make efforts. I don't know, as one becomes old, we become sort of reflective, and sometimes I think back on many things that I could have done a lot better, or many things that I regret that I did, either things or to people. but it was all in the same mood of trying to please. So in that sort of absolute sense, you can't go wrong. But nonetheless, that intelligence for how to really fulfill Lord Chaitanya's mission. What do we do? We got a great place. Now we're going to get a farm. We're going to sell this place. We're going to get that. And how's it going to work? And to make it happen. And of course, there's always the unknown. There's always Krishna stepping into that situation and helping to fulfill the plan. When I was in Montreal, we were looking for a new place. We didn't have a place. First, we lived in this bowling alley, and Srila Prabhupada was there, and then we had to move out of the bowling alley, mostly because the chants was disturbing the neighbors. There was the pizzeria downstairs and the pub beside it. They couldn't handle, chants was, when they made the chants, they said, chants, here it comes, and then it was like, it's like a bomb went off. Yeah. It was the real thing. And then we're looking for a place to buy, and we found this wonderful place on, he knows, Mountain Street. And it was a gentleman's club. It was out of this world. And Mountain Street, this is like, right downtown. It's the equivalent of Soho Street in London. And but the building was much much nicer. They wouldn't sell to us. We are not selling to the Hare Krishnas. Gentlemen's Club is not. I guess they were getting a better place, although it was there for a long time. And so we found the current place that we're in, and which was like this, very similar, not as big with the other facilities, but still it was a very good place. And I forget who it was, also some sort of religious, pseudo-religious groups who had it. And unbeknown to us, our lawyer took the gentlemen's club owners to court. And on the day to pay for place where we are now, Pinef, then the news came, judge ordered that they have to sell to us. They haven't gotten an offer since then. You cannot not sell to the Hare Krishnas because they're going to turn it into a Hare Krishna temple. So now, what do you do? We had this one, and we had that one. And I was sitting there, I wasn't the temple president, I was Sankirtan leader, sitting there with the temple president. I says, okay, Sivarama, what do we do? And I suggested going with what we were going to close that day. We had the bank transfer and everything ready to go, but it was a mistake. It was a mistake. I got to live with that for the rest of my life, and unfortunately, that part of town never came up. Although the Olympics were 100 yards, 200 yards down the road. They built the Olympic Stadium over there, and during the Olympics it was great for Sankirtan. But after that, the place is, it's just lower middle class area. C'est la vie. I have to live with it, make a mistake and try to do the right thing, but wasn't experienced enough. And I made the same mistake in Chicago. Good thing I didn't make the same mistake in Hungary. Would have made the same mistake in Chicago. Same thing, we have a similar situation. Anybody here from Chicago? You know Chicago. There was this motel along hotel along Lakeshore Drive, and then there was this other place, which was again owned by a religious organization on Lunt Street. So which one? Good thing my GBC was involved in the decision, so it wasn't just up to me, but it would have been better. Lakeshore Drive is like, well, I don't know Atlanta, but it's the place to be in Chicago, except in the winter time when the snow's blowing off Lake Michigan, then a different story. Great to be snowed in to O'Hare and you couldn't go back. You were just stuck there with all the passengers because cars couldn't go anywhere. I guess you don't get much snow here. You get snow at all?
Hardly.
Okay, before I get into talking about the snowstorms, it's one thing I miss in Hungary is snow. It's nice. Everything gets white for a little while until it starts melting. New Vrindavan had lots of snow? Yeah, austerity. I was just on Sadhu Sangha, met one lady. She was Brahmacharini at that time. And we were talking about when we were in Winnipeg, it was a snowstorm. And to get out the front door, you had to make a tunnel. In other words, the snow was above. We made a tunnel to get out. 70 below, we made front pages. I sent the devotees out 70 below zero. Ooh. That was with the wind chill factor. That was, everybody really appreciated us. You guys really convinced.
Maharaj, you were speaking about how in Vrindavan from 12 to 2 you would hear some extraordinary sounds. What were those sounds, Maharaj?
Say that again?
You said from 12 to 2 in Vrindavan you would hear some extraordinary sounds when you would wake up.
I don't know. I just heard it just sounds some mystical singing, but it was far, far away. It could have just, no doubt it was just some kirtan going on somewhere. But I don't know. It was very, very, very. Everything is in one sense still, and in the other sense there's such nice atmosphere, and you you can feel that, Krishna's he's here, he's everywhere, there's no distractions. Then after that things start to really happen. I didn't see or hear any extraordinary. Sir?
I don't know if it's my place to speak. The brothers have been so loving and grateful for allowing me to be here as a devotee, Hare Krishna. But I wanted to ask, was there a difference? Because I am a devotee of spirit, and I love spirit, and I love Krishna. Is there a difference between Christ's consciousness? Because there's a scripture that says, you adulterous people, do you know friendship with the world is enmity to God? And also the root definition of Islam being in full submission to Allah, to Great Spirit. So is there a difference for my Native American people? We call it Wakan Tanka. Is there a difference in that energy? Because Krishna is indeed everything, and it's nothing that Krishna Brahma is not. So is there a difference in true Krishna consciousness and Christ consciousness?
Srila Prabhupada spiritual master, he would always emphasize that whatever religion we're claiming to be connected to, but then we really have to follow it. Thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not commit adultery, etc., etc. And there may be a hierarchy in terms of the knowledge or the awareness which is given, but ultimately the goal, especially in Christianity, is to love God.
To love God.
Thou shalt love the Lord with all thy heart and with all thy might. So, but now how do you love God? So of course the first sign of loving God is that whatever He tells us we follow. And that was, Prabhupada used to criticize, all right, but then why aren't the Christians, for instance, all vegetarians?
Exactly.
When it says thou shalt not kill. And I've had so many discussions with so many super nice, especially Catholics. Generally Catholics they even accept deity worship in a sense, which is very, very close to us. But ultimately any Christian who follows Jesus Christ's teachings, then yes, he will learn to love God in due course of time. And so Christ consciousness, Krishna consciousness, and just like if we're Hare Krishnas, then we got to follow what Krishna says. We have to follow what Prabhupada says. And if we're not, then the clothes and the rituals don't make us right.
I appreciate you. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Okay. I don't like holding up Sankirtan. I used to always be very strict. Okay. I mentioned that, I won't say it. In Chicago we had Bhagavatam class, after Mangalarti. That was because the ladies insisted on being out at the airport by 6 a.m. Because, there's different rushes that come in. So I don't know what came in, it's because we were never out there until 9, except for marathon. So we were out there for the 9 o'clock rush, but that meant 8:30, the van left 8:30. If you're not in the van, tough luck, then, you come. We left, it took exactly half hour, we were there. So for that means that 7:45, everything's over, prasadam, out the door. Good times when you're young. That's what nice, strong young men are really designed for. Use your strength and youth for serving Srila Prabhupada. Hare Krishna. Jai Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Srīmad Bhagavatam ki jai, Gaur Bhakta Vrinda ki jai, Jai Nitai Gaur Premanandi.